If you've opened this message, it's not an accident. Something deep inside you already senses that the old version of you is reaching its expiration point. Not in a physical sense, your body isn't dying, but energetically, vibrationally, dimensionally, a part of you knows that the identity you've been carrying is no longer capable of walking into the next chapter of your evolution. And that knowing didn't come from your logical mind. It came from your quantum field, the vast, unseen intelligence surrounding you, calling you toward the timeline, where your highest self already exists. Right now, as your eyes move across these words, there is an invisible architecture around you, a field of old patterns, old emotions, old beliefs, old energetic signatures that has kept you looping through the same life, experiences again and again. And here's the part most people never realize. This field isn't just in your head. It's woven into the very fabric of your reality. It subtly shapes your choices, your reactions, your relationships, your opportunities, and even the way the world responds to you. Have you ever wondered why the harder you push yourself to change, the more you seem to stay exactly the same? Why some people reinvent themselves overnight while others spend decades wrestling with the same limitations? The answer lies in one of the most misunderstood principles in quantum physics: observer collapse. It's the scientific description of what ancient mystics called the death of the false self. There is a precise moment, a measurable, energetic threshold when your consciousness shifts dimensions. A moment when the identity you've held onto begins to dissolve at the quantum level. In that dissolution, something extraordinary occurs. The universe begins reorganizing itself around the new version of you that's trying to emerge. But here's the problem. Most people never reach this point because they're doing the exact opposite of what transformation truly requires. They try to stack new habits on top of an outdated identity. They try to improve the self that was never meant to survive the next stage of their evolution. They try to hold on to the old frequency while tuning into a new one, like attempting to change a radio station but refusing to release the current signal. Every spiritual tradition has tried to communicate this truth. You cannot ascend while holding on to who you used to be. The ancient mystics said, "You cannot pour new wine into old wineskins." Quantum physics agrees. A system cannot reorganize until its old coherence collapses. And right now, reading these words, you're standing at the threshold of that collapse, the doorway between your old identity and the infinite potential of who you're becoming. Before a new timeline can activate, something subtle but powerful begins to happen inside you. You start feeling a strange discomfort, an inner friction that doesn't come from the outside world, but from the collision between two versions of you, the self that is fading and the self that is trying to emerge. This tension isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that your consciousness is shifting frequencies. Most people misinterpret this. They call it anxiety, overthinking, restlessness, demotivation, burnout. But at the quantum level, what you're experiencing is identity, destabilization, the shaking of the old energy, structure that's been holding your past reality in place. It's like the grid of your old life begins to crack, pixel by pixel, because your energy is no longer feeding it. Think back for a moment. How many times have you felt disconnected from things that once excited you? How often do you sense that certain people, places, or habits no longer fit you? How many moments lately feel like the universe is quietly pulling you away from your old rhythm? That's not mood. That's not randomness. That's the quantum field, signaling that your frequency is outgrowing its old container. Every timeline operates like a frequency band. When your consciousness rises above the band you've been living in, you don't just become different, you become incompatible with the reality that used to feel normal. And that incompatibility creates symptoms: confusion, emotional release, sudden clarity, random bursts of intuition, urges to isolate, urges to simplify, urges to redirect your energy. The old world starts feeling heavy, forced, repetitive. The new world starts whispering, quiet, magnetic, inevitable. This transition phase is where 99% of people turn back. They feel the internal turbulence and assume it means something is breaking. And yes, something is breaking. But it's not your life. It's the version of you that was built from survival, fear, conditioning, and limitation. That version cannot cross into the frequency of expansion, alignment, intuition, and coherence. Here's the hidden truth. Before every quantum shift, The universe introduces a period of destabilization to loosen your grip on who you've been. It's the energetic equivalent of an earthquake, not to destroy you, but to free you from the structures that can no longer contain your evolution. And if you feel this happening right now, then you're already further than you realize. The old timeline is weakening. The new one is pulling you forward. The only thing you must do is not run back to the version of you that feels familiar, but no longer feels true. The moment you stop fighting your current reality and start observing it, everything begins to shift. Not because the world suddenly became kinder, or easier, or more aligned, but because you stopped feeding the wrong timeline with your energy. Energy is attention. Attention is choice. And choice is the doorway to a new version of you. Most people don't understand this. They think change happens by forcing, pushing, grinding, hustling, repeating the same mindset with more intensity. But energy doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to coherence. When your inner state and your outer intention vibrate in the same direction, you create a frequency strong enough to pull a new reality toward you. Right now, everything you're experiencing is simply a reflection of your dominant state of being. Not your desires, not your goals, not your affirmations. Your state. If your state is confusion, you manifest experiences that confuse you. If your state is lack, you manifest situations that show you what's missing. If your state is guilt, you attract reasons to feel guilty. And if your state is power, the universe bends around that power. This is the part most people skip, the uncomfortable truth that you're not responding to reality. You're projecting it. Every day, every moment, your frequency is sending out signals across infinite timelines. And one of those timelines responds back. You don't get the timeline you want. You get the timeline that matches you. So when you feel stuck, when life feels like it's looping, repeating, glitching, it's not because the universe is punishing you. It's because you're still tuned to the same emotional station, the same regrets, the same doubts, the same anger, the same stories, and life keeps echoing them back. But here's the shift. The moment you choose a new state onto even before, anything changes outside, the timeline begins to rearrange itself. Subtle signs appear. People shift. Opportunities crack open. Synchronicities multiply. It feels like the universe is whispering, yes. Keep going. You're aligning. Because timelines don't change when the world moves. Timelines change when you do. And the craziest part? The universe doesn't need time to rearrange your reality. It needs alignment. The moment you drop the emotional weight that anchors you to the wrong timeline, you instantly rise to the one meant for you, the one where things flow. Doors open, and life feels like it's finally responding to who you truly are. There comes a moment, subtle, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when your inner world shifts before anything outside of you does. It feels like a slight loosening, a soft exhale, a brief moment where the heaviness you've been carrying suddenly doesn't feel like it belongs to you anymore. That moment is the beginning of a new timeline. People think timelines shift through big breakthroughs, loud awakenings, dramatic changes. But that's not how it works. Timelines shift in silence. They shift the moment. Your internal vibration stops, matching the reality you no longer want to experience. Before anything changes externally, the old timeline begins to collapse internally, and you feel it. You feel it as discomfort around old habits. You feel it as boredom with old patterns. You feel it as a gentle rejection of the identities you once clung to. You feel it as the knowing that this version of me is expired. That feeling is not confusion. It is not anxiety. It is not restlessness. It is the frequency of your next timeline pulling you forward. The universe doesn't force you into alignment. It invites you. It whispers through intuition, through resistance, through a strange emptiness that tells you, you don't belong here anymore. This is the transition point, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And in this space, the old timeline tries to hold you. It throws familiar emotions at you. It makes you revisit old wounds. It brings back old temptations and old fears, not to punish you, but to test your signal. Because every timeline has a gravitational pull, and the one you feed with your emotional energy is the one you lock into. When you start to evolve, the wrong timeline doesn't let go easily. It tries to pull you back with old triggers, old memories, old versions of you that no longer fit. This is why growth feels like chaos, because you're not just changing your mindset, you're shifting an entire energetic frequency. But the moment you stop reacting to the echo of the old timeline, something powerful happens. You begin to detach. Your awareness rises above your circumstances. You start choosing responses instead of repeating patterns. And in that instant, you weaken the gravitational pull of the timeline that kept you stuck for so long. This is when the new timeline begins to stabilize. You start noticing synchronicities appearing like breadcrumbs. You feel guided, supported, aligned. Doors that were once shut begin to open, not because you fought harder, but because you finally tuned into the version of reality that was always waiting for you. This is the quiet shift, the invisible transformation. The moment your vibration becomes your future, there comes a point in your journey where the universe stops asking you to heal and starts asking you to choose. Not choose a goal, not choose a desire, not choose a dream but choose a version of yourself. Because every identity you try on carries a different timeline, and every timeline reshapes the reality standing in front of you. Most people stay stuck because they try to create a new life while staying emotionally loyal to their old self. They want abundance, but they keep the frequency of lack. They want freedom, but they carry the vibration of fear. They want alignment, but they think thoughts that pull them out of coherence. And then they wonder why nothing changes. But the universe is exact. It doesn't give you what you want. It mirrors what you embody. And embodiment begins in the unseen places, the moments no one else notices. The choices you make when no one is watching, the thoughts you allow when your mind drifts, the emotions you feed when life tests you. This is the part of the timeline shift that feels like the void. You're no longer your old self, but not yet the future version you're stepping into. It's uncomfortable. It's silent. It's disorienting. But it's where the real transformation happens. Because in the void, your old emotional identity begins to dissolve. And that dissolution feels like losing yourself, but you're not losing yourself. You're losing the version of you that kept you aligned with the wrong reality. In this phase, the universe is not withholding anything from you. It's preparing you. It's clearing out the emotional frequencies that don't match the timeline you're calling in. It sends you triggers to show you what you're still attached to. It sends you delays to test whether your signal is stable. It sends you silence so you can hear your own inner frequency without distortion. And then, you reach the turning point, the moment where you respond differently than you ever have before. Maybe you don't chase. Maybe you don't react. Maybe you don't spiral. Maybe you choose stillness instead of fear, trust instead of doubt, alignment instead of desperation. That single response and that tiny shift in energy is where the timeline locks in. Because timelines don't shift when life gets better. They shift when you behave like the version of you who already has the life you want. This is the initiation, the rebirth, the quiet claiming of a future that already belongs to you. There's a moment in every transformation where the universe tests the one thing you've been avoiding. Can you hold the frequency of your future even when your present contradicts it? This is where most people fall back into their old timeline. Not because they aren't capable, not because they're not chosen, but because they interpret temporary discomfort as a sign of failure. They think resistance means stop. They think silence means it's not working. They think delays mean you're not ready. But in reality, these moments exist to strengthen the signal you're sending out. When you shift timelines, everything that is not aligned with the new energetic version of you begins to surface. Old emotions, old doubts, old patterns, they don't come back to haunt you. They come back so you can finally rise above them. This is the final clearing, the energetic purge, the recalibration of the self you're leaving behind. Your ego panics during this phase because it can't anchor itself in the unknown. It wants proof. It wants comfort. It wants the familiar. And the familiar, even when painful, feels safer than the expansion your soul is calling you into. But here's the truth. The unfamiliar is not your enemy. It is your evolution. Your future timeline is made of frequencies you haven't mastered yet. Confidence you've never expressed. Worthiness you've never fully claimed. Boundaries you've never embodied. And the universe can't drop you into that timeline until you can hold the emotional vibration that matches it. This is why you're tested, not to break you but to stretch you, not to punish you but to prepare you, not to block you but to align you. And this is the part where your power reveals. itself, not in the moments when everything is flowing, but in the moments when nothing makes sense and you still choose to trust your inner signal. Because trust is a frequency, and that frequency rewires timelines faster than any action you take in the external world. When you stay grounded during adversity, when you remain centered in uncertainty, when you choose alignment over reaction, you dissolve the last threads connecting you to the old timeline. You become untouchable by the triggers that once controlled you. You become immune to the narratives that once shaped you, and then something subtle shifts. Your emotions soften, your mind quiets, your energy stabilizes. Suddenly, the version of you that once felt impossible begins to feel natural. This is the moment your future timeline recognizes you and begins to sync with you. There comes a point in your evolution where the universe stops whispering and starts redirecting. Not through signs, not through intuition, but through the sudden collapse of everything that no longer matches who you're becoming. It feels harsh. It feels abrupt. It feels like life is pulling the ground from beneath your feet. But what's actually happening is the exact opposite. The universe is removing the timelines you've outgrown. You'll notice this phase because certain things simply stop working. Conversations stop flowing. People you once resonated with suddenly feel distant. Habits that used to numb you no longer soothe you. Environments that felt comfortable begin to drain you. And the dreams you once chased no longer feel like they fit in your hands. This is not loss. This is alignment. When a timeline collapses, it feels like chaos, but energetically it's precision. The universe is clearing out frequencies that cannot exist in the reality you're stepping into. And it does this quickly, decisively, without negotiation. Because if the universe gave you time to cling, you would. If it gave you comfort, you'd stay in the familiar. And familiarity is the enemy of transformation. This is why things fall apart all at once. This is why life forces you into choices you avoided. This is why you're pushed into silence, solitude, or complete emotional discomfort. Because identity cannot shift while you're still holding on to the emotional scaffolding of your old self. In this phase, you'll feel an internal split. One part of you desperately wants to go back to who you were, while another part whispers, "You can't." That whisper isn't weakness. It's your future self speaking through intuition. The new timeline is already activated. You just haven't fully stepped into it yet. This is also the stage where resistance peaks. Your mind tries bargaining. Your emotions try replaying old stories. Your fears try reviving old narratives. Not because they're true, but because they're familiar. And familiar feels safe even when it limits you. But here's the hidden gift. Once a timeline collapses, it cannot be resurrected. You can cling, you can cry, you can resist. But the universe will not return you to a version of life that no longer aligns with your frequency. This is the pivot, the irreversible shift. The moment where every step forward feels frightening, but every step backward feels impossible. And if you pay close attention, you'll notice something powerful emerging beneath the rubble. A sense of internal clarity you never had before. A quiet certainty rising within you. A pull toward your future that is stronger than your fear of change. This is the sign you're ready. Not because you feel confident, but because you finally feel done with the version of yourself that kept you small. There is a phase in your timeline shift where everything becomes strangely quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, just quiet. It's the kind of silence that feels like the universe is holding its breath, watching to see what version of you will emerge next. This is the stillness before the breakthrough, the energetic pause where nothing seems to move, even though everything is rearranging beneath the surface. And this silence confuses people. They think something is wrong. They think they've slipped backward. They think the universe has forgotten them. But silence is never abandonment. Silence is alignment. This is the phase where the universe removes all distractions, so you can hear your own frequency with absolute clarity. Because if you're going to step into a new timeline, you can't carry the noise of the old one. You can't bring old doubts, old attachments, old emotional addictions. So the universe quiets everything, not to punish you, but to sharpen you. In this silence, you start to see things for what they truly are. You notice who drains you. You notice who uplifts you. You notice what feels forced and what feels natural. You notice how much of your old identity was built on pleasing, performing, or surviving. This clarity isn't comfortable, but it's sacred. It's the moment you realize you were never stuck. You were just surrounded by signals that didn't belong to your next reality. And as the silence deepens, something subtle begins to shift inside you. Your old triggers lose their power. Your old patterns feel heavier to repeat. Your old fears feel smaller than the future calling you. You begin to sense the difference between what was familiar and what is aligned. And alignment begins to matter more than comfort. That's how you know the new timeline is approaching. When comfort no longer seduces you the way it used to, this is the timeline recalibration phase. Nothing moves outside because everything is moving inside. Your intuition becomes louder. Your vision becomes clearer. Your energy becomes more selective. Your emotions become more honest. You begin to operate from a quieter strength, one rooted in certainty rather than hope, one rooted in trust rather than desperation, one rooted in identity rather than effort. And when this inner shift reaches its peak, something powerful happens. The universe responds. Synchronicities return, opportunities reappear, people who match your frequency show up without forcing. Life begins to flow again, not because your reality changed, but because you did. This is the silent upgrade, the invisible ascension. The moment your new timeline starts syncing with you before you even step into it, there comes a stage in your evolution where the universe begins to reveal why everything happened the way it did. Not through explanations, but through alignment. Suddenly the delays make sense. The losses make sense. The quiet phases, the endings, the uncomfortable transitions, they all start falling into place, like pieces of a puzzle you didn't know you were solving. This is the phase where you begin to see the architecture of your timeline, not as randomness, not as chaos, but as precision, deliberate, intentional, perfectly timed. You start realizing that the universe wasn't taking things away from you. It was removing the versions of reality that would have limited your evolution. It wasn't delaying you. It was positioning you. It wasn't making you wait. It was shaping you into someone who could sustain the timeline you were calling forward. And this is where gratitude begins to replace resistance, where understanding replaces frustration, where clarity replaces confusion. You look back and see that the things you thought were breaking, you were actually breaking open the paths you were meant to walk. The people who left didn't abandon you. They exited a timeline that could no longer hold your expansion. The silence you feared wasn't emptiness, it was preparation. In this phase, your awareness heightens in a way you've never felt before. You start noticing patterns in the people who enter your life. You see synchronicities stacking on top of each other. You catch yourself thinking thoughts you've never thought, feeling emotions you've never allowed, stepping into a confidence you never claimed. It's not accidental. It's energetic alignment. This is the moment where your soul starts moving faster than your doubts, faster than your fears, faster than the old scripts you once lived in. You feel pulled, not pushed, toward a version of life that finally feels like it belongs to you. And this shift creates a magnetic field around you. People notice you differently. Opportunities gravitate toward you. Conversations align with your higher vision. You begin attracting rather than chasing, because chasing is a survival frequency. Attraction is an aligned one. You're no longer operating from "I hope it happens." You're operating from "it's already unfolding." And that subtle shift in belief bends reality around you. This is the integration phase where your inner identity and your outer timeline begin to merge, where the universe stops testing your readiness and starts responding to your embodiment. You are no longer the person who was waiting for a sign. You are the sign. You are the frequency. You are the shift. There is a moment in your timeline shift where you stop hoping for your new reality, and you start behaving like it's already yours. This is the most powerful phase of all, because the universe doesn't respond to wishful thinking. It responds to embodied frequency. And when your behavior aligns with the identity of your future self, the timeline snaps into place with a force you can feel in your entire being. This is when you notice a new kind of confidence rising within you. Not loud, not dramatic, quiet, grounded, unshakable. You start making choices you never made before. You start setting boundaries you once avoided. You stop entertaining energies that drain you. You stop negotiating with situations that undermine you. You stop shrinking yourself to fit realities you've outgrown. It's not ego. It's alignment. You begin moving like someone who knows they're supported. You stop rushing. You stop begging. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to prove your worth. Your energy becomes so clear, so steady, so intentional that the universe has no option but to reorganize itself around your frequency. This is the power of embodiment. It bends timelines without force. And as you settle into this new internal identity, something extraordinary happens. Your external world begins to respond instantly. People treat you differently. Opportunities show up out of nowhere. Paths clear without effort. Obstacles dissolve before they even materialize. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you are no longer tuned to the version of reality where struggle is the main story. This is the phase where your intuition becomes almost prophetic. You know when something is right before the mind catches up. You feel when something is wrong before you have evidence. You sense what's aligned without needing validation. This clarity isn't magic, it's coherence. The inner and outer frequencies are finally matching. You realize you no longer crave what the old you wanted. You no longer chase what once controlled you. You no longer fear what once paralyzed you. You no longer settle for timelines that cost your peace. You're not becoming someone new. You're remembering who you always were before fear reshaped you. And at this point, the universe mirrors back exactly what you've become. Not the wounded version, not the uncertain version, not the version stuck between timelines, but the expanded version of the one who finally realized that reality is not something you wait for, it's something you align with. This is the embodiment, the arrival, the moment the future timeline stops being a possibility and becomes your lived experience. There is a point in your transformation where you realize the universe was never asking you to
manifest something outside of you.
It was asking you to upgrade the version of yourself who receives it. This is the stage where the inner shift becomes so deeply integrated that your old identity can no longer survive in your energetic field. You don't just think differently, you exist differently. This is where the timeline shift becomes irreversible. You can no longer return to the emotional patterns that once defined you. Not because you're forcing yourself to evolve, but because those frequencies don't feel like home anymore. The person you were is still a memory, but not a match. In this phase, something powerful happens. Your energy becomes selective. Your consciousness becomes refined. Your boundaries become natural rather than defensive. Your standards rise without effort, not from ego, but from self-recognition. You stop trying to save timelines you've already evolved out of. You stop clinging to connections that operated on your old frequency. You stop attaching your worth to outcomes, reactions, or validation. You let life flow through you without gripping it. And here's the truth. Once you reach this level of internal coherence, reality bends around you faster than ever before. The universe accelerates your timeline because your energy is no longer fractured. You're no longer sending mixed signals. You're no longer torn between becoming and belonging. You've chosen yourself on an energetic level, and the universe responds to that with precision. In this stage, your manifestations no longer feel like manifestations. They feel like natural extensions of who you are becoming. Opportunities arrive without you chasing them. People show up with the same clarity you carry. Doors open without resistance. Not because your life magically changed, but because your frequency finally matched the path designed for you. This is also where your past stops controlling your emotional responses. You no longer react from wounds. You respond from awareness. Triggered thoughts dissolve before they spiral. Old narratives lose their charge. The emotional weight that shaped your decisions for years simply falls away. This isn't suppression. This is liberation. And the most profound part? You begin to trust yourself at a level you never knew was possible. Not because everything is perfect, but because you finally understand your own power. You feel guided from within. You feel held by something bigger than fear. You feel aligned with a timeline that feels like destiny rather than desire. This is the phase where you step into life with a sense of inevitability. The knowing that what is meant for you cannot miss you, and what isn't meant for you cannot stay. You're not hoping anymore. You're not waiting. You're not doubting. You're becoming. There comes a moment in your evolution where the universe stops testing you and starts revealing you. Not the old you, not the wounded you, not the hesitant, uncertain, half-awake version of you, but the you that has been quietly forming beneath every challenge, every ending, every realignment. This is the stage where your new timeline no longer feels like a concept. It feels like your natural state. You're not trying to stay aligned anymore. You are aligned. You're not forcing new habits, they flow. You're not fighting old patterns. They dissolve. You're not negotiating with your standards. They are simply the baseline of who you've become. In this phase, your energy feels different, more rooted, more intentional, more sovereign. You stop leaking power into situations that don't matter. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop giving emotional CPR to connections that flatlined long ago. You stop dimming yourself to keep other people comfortable. Your frequency becomes a filter. Anything that cannot match it falls away effortlessly. Anything that aligns with it arrives with clarity. This is the part of the journey where life starts moving, with you instead of against you. You feel it in the synchronicities. You feel it in the ease. You feel it in the way opportunities show up without resistance. It's not luck, it's resonance. Your mindset shifts from, will this work out? To an, of course it will, and it's already unfolding. Because you're no longer operating from doubt. You're operating from identity. The identity of someone who is synced with the timeline they were always meant to live. In this stage, you also gain a new relationship with the past. You don't resent it. You don't avoid it. You don't relive it. You simply understand it from a higher vantage point. You see why certain people entered your life and why they had to leave. You see why things collapsed and how they were clearing space. You see how every delay, every detour, every silence rearranged your inner world so your outer world could finally align. This is the phase where emotional clarity becomes your superpower. You know what drains you. You know what elevates you. You know what feels like contraction and what feels like expansion. You know which dreams are ego-driven and which ones are soul-coded. And because of that clarity, you move differently. Your steps are smaller but sharper. Your presence is softer but stronger. Your decisions are fewer but more powerful. Your energy is quieter but unmistakable. This is the timeline where you stop seeking permission. You stop outsourcing validation. You stop questioning whether you're ready. You realize you were never becoming someone new. You were remembering the version of you that existed before fear defined your identity. This is the reclamation, the stabilization, the inner coronation of your next reality. There is a moment in your evolution when you notice something extraordinary. The old timeline doesn't call you anymore. It's not a struggle to leave it behind, because energetically you no longer resonate with it. The patterns that once trapped you, the fear, the second guessing, the small compromises, they no longer feel like home. You begin to inhabit a frequency that the old self cannot follow. This is the stage where your nervous system begins to calibrate to a new standard. Your body itself becomes a signal to reality, a living antenna for higher possibilities. You start noticing subtle shifts. Your posture feels taller, your energy lighter, your thoughts more spacious. The old automatic responses lose their pull. Emotional triggers that once controlled your decisions now barely register. You're no longer reacting, you're responding. And your responses come from a place of knowing rather than survival. During this phase, synchronicities become undeniable. People appear at the exact moment you need them. Resources arrive without effort. Opportunities present themselves in ways that feel almost orchestrated. And yet the most profound aspect of this stage is internal. You recognize that the external world is simply reflecting the coherence you've cultivated within. The universe doesn't give you things. It mirrors the vibrational frequency you embody. You also start to notice how previous struggles were, preparing you for this alignment. Every heartbreak, every failure, every loss, every uncomfortable silence, it was all recalibrating your energy to match the timeline of your highest potential. What once felt like suffering now appears as sacred preparation. The discomfort of the past was not punishment. It was guidance, sharpening your resonance, strengthening your ability to receive what your soul had always known was possible. In this phase, old fears begin to dissolve with astonishing speed. The fear of judgment, of failure, of not being enough. It no longer has the same weight because your identity has shifted. You now inhabit a consciousness that knows its own worth innately, independent of external circumstances. You understand that who you are is not defined by achievement, appearance, or approval. It is defined by alignment with your true essence. And the beauty of this phase is subtle but profound. The universe begins to trust you in return. Opportunities arrive in ways that test your alignment, but they no longer overwhelm you. Challenges appear, yes, but you face them from a frequency of mastery rather than fear. You act from coherence, not effort. You move from surrender rather than striving. This is the phase where your transformation becomes visible to yourself and others, not because you are performing, not because you are trying harder, but because your energy has been recalibrated to the frequency of your highest self. You are no longer a version of yourself negotiating for possibility. There comes a point in your Quantum shift, where you realize the old strategies no longer work. Trying harder, pushing more, planning longer, it all feels unnecessary. You understand at a cellular level that transformation isn't about effort. It's about alignment. You can try to fix the old self, but it's like painting a cage gold. The bars are still there. True change comes from stepping outside the cage entirely. In this stage, the universe tests your surrender. Opportunities appear that seem easy but require trust. Challenges arise that seem impossible but demand faith. Every situation becomes a reflection. How willing are you to let go of control? How ready are you to dissolve the old identity and embody the frequency of the self that is already free, already abundant, already whole? This is also where you start seeing the invisible mechanics of reality. The coincidences that once felt random now reveal themselves as perfectly orchestrated. The people who enter your life are not accidental. The lessons you encounter are not punitive. Even your past missteps are reframed as precise calibrations, preparing your nervous system and your energy field to receive a higher frequency. Your perception begins to shift. You notice that old habits, emotional reactions, thought loops, limiting beliefs are like static on a radio. The more you stop identifying with them, the clearer your internal signal becomes. And as your signal strengthens, your external reality responds in kind. Synchronicities multiply, opportunities accelerate, and people mirror the coherence you've cultivated. At this stage, your nervous system itself transforms. Stress patterns diminish. Cortisol normalizes. Heart rate variability improves. Your body operates with a rhythm tuned to higher possibilities. This isn't metaphysical speculation. It's the biology of alignment. The proof that letting go rewires not only your mind but your entire physiology. And there's a subtler, deeper change happening simultaneously. Your consciousness expands. You begin to operate beyond cause and effect thinking. You sense timelines, feel probabilities, intuitively understand the energetic flow of reality. Decisions become effortless because they align with your resonance. You're no longer negotiating life. Life is negotiating with you. This is the stage where your identity fully shifts. You no longer cling to the old narratives of fear, limitation, or scarcity. You no longer define yourself by past roles, relationships, or failures. You step into the clarity of knowing who you are beyond the illusions of separateness. The old self isn't destroyed, it's liberated. Its energy merges into the higher self, forming a coherence that radiates in every thought, word, and action. This is the invisible architecture of your new reality, the unseen foundation upon which your highest timeline is now anchored. There comes a stage in your quantum transformation where the magnitude of your shift becomes undeniable. You can no longer ignore the subtle cues, the energy changes, the quiet nudges guiding you forward. The old fears, doubts, and limitations that once defined your experience now feel like echoes from someone else's life, distant, irrelevant, almost unbelievable. Your consciousness is operating at a frequency that the old self cannot access. At this point, your body, mind, and energy field all harmonize with the reality you are calling forth. Every thought, every choice, every emotion is now a deliberate vibration, a tuning of your internal frequency that resonates with your highest timeline. You begin to notice how effortlessly the universe responds to your clarity, how synchronicities multiply, how the path of least resistance always leads you to what is truly aligned. This is the phase where your inner guidance eclipses your old need for external validation. You no longer rely on advice, approval, or reassurance to make decisions. Your own intuition becomes a compass, your own knowing becomes a law, and your own presence becomes a field that organizes reality around it. This is the hallmark of true embodiment, the moment where who you are internally dictates what manifests externally. And yet this stage is not without its challenges. The universe tests your trust continuously. Old attachments, unresolved emotions, and dormant fears rise to the surface one last time. Not to trap you, but to give you a final opportunity to release them. These are not setbacks, they are thresholds, invitations to let go deeper, to surrender more fully, to move beyond the last vestiges of the identity that no longer serves you. It is in facing these final thresholds that your transformation crystallizes. You realize that nothing outside you can define your worth, your power, or your potential. Every moment of resistance, every habit, every thought that once held you back is dissolved not by effort, but by conscious surrender. The act of letting go is no longer a practice. It becomes a natural state of being. In this frequency, you operate from presence, not reaction. From clarity, not confusion. From trust, not fear. Every interaction becomes an opportunity for coherence. Every challenge becomes a doorway for expansion. Every moment becomes a reflection of the self you've always been waiting to embody. And then subtly, almost imperceptibly, you notice it. The old timeline has stopped tugging at you. It no longer exists as a possibility because your consciousness has shifted irreversibly. You are no longer trying to transform. You are transformed. This is the profound truth of the quantum shift. The old self doesn't evolve into the new self. The old self dissolves, and the new self emerges, fully alive, fully coherent, fully aligned with the highest potential of your being. This is the final threshold, the culmination of everything that has been unfolding within you. The point where the quantum shift is no longer an idea, no longer a practice, no longer a process you do. It becomes the living reality of your existence. The old self has dissolved completely, leaving only the coherent, expanded version of you that has always existed in potential. At this stage, you experience what the mystics have described for millennia: a sense of timelessness, an unshakable inner peace, and a knowing that transcends the intellect. Your consciousness operates beyond linear cause and effect. You perceive probabilities, timelines, and potentialities simultaneously. Every action, every thought, every intention resonates with the energy of creation itself. The universe doesn't respond to force, desire, or fear anymore. It responds to the frequency of your being. The beauty of this final stage is that life no longer feels like a series of obstacles to overcome. It becomes a dance with infinite possibility. Challenges still arise, but they no longer provoke fear or resistance. Instead, they become opportunities for deeper alignment, for refinement of your energy, for expansion of your consciousness. You no longer chase reality, you inhabit it. You no longer negotiate with outcomes. You radiate coherence, and reality organizes itself around your frequency. At this level, you notice that the ordinary moments carry extraordinary potential. A conversation, a glance, a gesture, everything is imbued with synchronicity because your presence amplifies the flow of life around you. People, opportunities, and circumstances align effortlessly, mirroring the clarity, integrity, and resonance you embody. You understand that the quantum field is not separate from you. It is you. Your consciousness shapes it, informs it, and expands with it. And here is the most profound revelation. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you have always been beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and limitation. The old self never held your true essence. It was only a temporary construct. Now the dreamer awakens. The infinite, unbounded, authentic self steps fully into the world. No longer constrained by the stories of the past, no longer limited by the perceptions of others, no longer resisting the flow of existence itself. This final phase is not a destination. It is a continuous state of being. The shift does not end. It evolves. The new you has always existed. And now, fully awake, fully embodied, fully aligned, you step into life as the living expression of your highest timeline. Welcome to your quantum self. Welcome to the limitless you. Welcome to the reality that has always been waiting for you. This is the end of the journey and the beginning of infinite possibility.